We're going to have the rest of the story about something I told you about, and so the rest of the story came over the internet. And it seems this man came home from work, and his wife was half dressed, and he thought she was running around on him, so he looked all over the place and he couldn't find anything, and he was running every which way, and he said he was just furious. And what had happened is that God had decided that it was getting awful crowded up there, so he'd laid down some new rules. And so what he said, he told Gabriel, he said, you stand at the gate and make sure that everyone's had a real hard life before they can get in. So this man comes home from work, and he looks everywhere, and finally he spies on the balcony. There are some fingers hanging onto the balcony. He's infuriated. He goes over and he stomps those fingers. He stomps them until the guy falls. And the guy only has shorts on, and so he falls into the bushes. He didn't hit the ground. He fell in the bushes, and so he was kind of dazed a little bit, but it didn't kill him. And so he's looking up, and this man was still so infuriated, he took his refrigerator and he pushed it over to the edge, and he pushed it over the edge of his apartment complex, and it went down and hit on the man laying in the bushes and squashed him. And so then he went running back into the house, and the next thing he knew, he was standing before Gabriel. He said, have you had what kind of life have you had? And so he told him what happened, and he said, and when I ran back into the house so infuriated, he said, I had a massive heart attack, and here I stand. He said, well, it sounds like you had a pretty bad time. So he said, go on in. Next day, this second man comes. No, he said, I was upstairs in this apartment, and I was doing my exercises. And I was on this machine that just almost stands you up. And he said, some way I slipped, and he said the next thing I knew, I was going over the banister, but I caught the man's banister down below me. And I'm hanging there by my fingers, and he said, all of a sudden this irate man comes out and starts stomping on my fingers. I fell into the bush, and I'm laying there, and I look up, and here he is pushing this refrigerator over the edge. And he said, and sure enough, it hit on me, and he said, and here I am. He said, well, it sounds like you've had a pretty bad time. You go on in. So Gabriel, by that point, was getting into it pretty good. So the next day, here come this third man. And he said, what is your story? He said, well, I was in a refrigerator. Well, that ties in with the thing I told you about the two blonde women and so forth. But there's another one about and I'll get off this in a minute. But there's another one about the Cajun who was fishing, and he had a big ice chest full of fish, and he was fixing to leave, and up walks the game warden. He says, you got a license for those fish? He said, no, sir, I don't have a license for those fish. He said, those fish belong to me. He said, every day I bring them out here in my ice chest, and I dump them into the water and I let them swim. And then after a little while, I open the ice chest back up and I holler, and they all come and they jump back in, and I take them home. He said, that's the biggest bunch of bull I've ever heard in my life. He said, you don't believe it? No, I don't believe it. Would you like to see it? Well, sure, I'd like to see it. He said, this I got to see. So the old boy takes his fish over there and he dumps them into the lake. They stand there about 15 minutes, and the old game warden says, well, where are they? And he says, where's what? He said, the fish. He said, what fish? And that ties in, and I don't know if they got it off the little black man that really happened to. He had a trunk load of furs, and the policeman stopped him, and he kept, every time he'd say, policeman say, where'd you get those furs in the trunk? He said, what furs? And this was his stock answer, and he hauled him in. He literally hauled him down to the judge. And the judge says to him, what do you got him in here for? And he says he's got a truckload of furs and he won't tell us where he got them. He said, where'd you get the furs? He said, what furs? And this went on for about 30 minutes, and finally the judge just told the officer, said, give him the key back to his car. He don't have any furs in that trunk. And so the man, he turned around and walked away. But what we're going to talk about tonight is who you are. We've got to understand who you are. If you don't understand who you are, you're going to keep letting they tell you who you are. They is this third person that stays in everybody's house. And when something comes up, they always bring they up as the reason they can't do it. They said, I can't do this. They have a law down there written in a book says I can't do this. And in reality, the whole system is set up. It's called a legal determination. Nobody can make a legal determination for you. You must make that for yourself. It's just like the man answering what furs. The issue is, why do you want to tell them anything? Always, when they ask you something, why do you want to talk? You see, everything you say can and will be held against you. And they'll tell you up front. Isn't that what they said in the Miranda Act? Everybody thought that they were really getting, they were really helping us with that Miranda Act. You have the right to remain silent. You claim that right and you lose all the rest of them. And that's exactly what was happening. But the issue is that you don't need to say anything to anyone, because what you say, now they have first-hand knowledge of what happened. Until that point, there is no first-hand knowledge, and there is no conviction without first-hand knowledge. Now, there are varied cases where they just go out and jump on somebody, and I'm not telling you it's 100%, but that's the way the system's set up. It is you telling them what they need to know, because the country is set up with two governments. One of them is called We the People. We the people are the private side of the government. The other side of the government, which is a big river right between us, is called the United States Corporation. In the Republic of Texas, it's different. Here, it is us versus the United States. It's the Republic of Texas on one side and they're on the other side. The difference in the two of them is that both of them are trying to contract the other onto their side of the venue. What they're always after is venue and jurisdiction. There is no venue and jurisdiction that you do not give them. In other words, what happened to us in 33 when all this started was Roosevelt, the first thing he said is all the property of the people will now belong to the state and will be used for the good of the state. That is the first statement he made when he went into office, March the 9th. The second one was the Trading with Enemies Act. He signed that. Why did he have to sign the Trading with Enemies Act? The 10-mile square area called Washington, D.C. had no jurisdiction over anybody in the 48 states, and they still don't. Everybody that thinks that the United States has jurisdiction in their state, you need to go back and read the founding documents. They're in a 10-mile square area. There never has been a third, a court, an Article III court, has never been set up outside of Washington, D.C. Now you say, what are all these people doing here? Well, you get a fox and he goes and sits in the middle of the chicken pen. And he sits around, and if he can convince a chicken that he belongs to him, then he gets him. But that's exactly what they are. You'll find out that they don't own those buildings that the federal government is in. Every one of them are leased. Why? They can't own, they cannot even be in the states unless the state sells them the land. And that was only for bases and things like that. Now, why I'm telling you that? Because it's all about jurisdictions where we get in trouble. The feds come into somebody's house and they kick their door in. They got about 20 people running in there screaming and all this, and so the people stand there and they can't do anything. All these people have guns. They don't come in marked cars. They come in just everyday cars, I guess the ones they drive to work. And so they come in, and immediately the people they come into the house will run get an attorney. And up front, an attorney is death. Anytime you get into trouble, he is death. He will make sure the court gets what they want out of you. Your own attorney is the one who signs you into jail. He is the one who has power of attorney, and they plea bargain. While you're sitting at home worrying about what's going to happen, he's down there plea bargaining with them, and he'll come back and tell you what they're going to do to you. I think I can get you 10 years. You could get 20. But I think I can get you 10 years if you won't give the judge trouble at the elocution when you have a chance to get up and speak. What he's done is he has signed, because he has power of attorney, he has signed your name already to take the 10 years. And what we have to understand, there hadn't been a court opened in this country since 1973. There are no courts. They are simply judges' chambers. They are simply having a hearing in the judges' chambers. There's a lot of difference in having court than in going in judges' chambers. Judges' chambers means that he is simply sitting there taking motions and signing documents. You realize in a court he does not hear motions. He does not sign documents. The court belongs to the jury. All of the paperwork is done before you go to court. I've been there. Your paperwork has to all be done before you go in, and you can't discuss anything that's not on that paperwork. But you see, they have it in the judges' chambers, and so you go into the judges' chambers, there's no rights in there. You don't have any rights. You only have what that judge is going to let you have. And guess whose side he's on? He's on the side of the plaintiff, the person who has brought the charge, because the plaintiff already has a he has a summary judgment already on you when he walks in. And so all he's going to do is sit there, and the judge is going to, he goes through all these things about motions. You ever notice that the defendant, they never honor a motion from him? One man went into federal court and he says, we're going to get them, we're going to file 400 motions. And I said, they're not going to accept one of them. Oh yeah, we're doing them exactly the way they're supposed to be, according to their books, according to everything. And they went in there and filed 400 motions. He didn't allow one of them. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to do anything. People think that the judge has to do this. He's in his chambers. That's his courtroom. But it is not the courtroom of what they're talking about. They shut it down in 1973 because they took away the plea of innocence. When you take away the plea of innocence, what do you got to plead to? You got to plead to guilty, not guilty, nolo contender, and all three of them are in favor of the court. And so when they took the plea of innocence at the same year, they took the intent, which always a state had to prove intent, and they placed the intent on the charge they was putting on the people they were bringing in. Now you have less than what chance? 99.5% of all defendants lose when they go to court. So your chances are pretty slim, aren't they? This is where it goes. See, and a lot of this we did not know until a year or so ago. So what happens is when you go in there and you've already got a summary judgment for you. Why is he hearing motions? Because he's going to hear motions to make you think that you're getting a trial. In a lawful court, the jury is in charge of the courtroom. The judge has nothing to say about the paperwork. All he does is shuffle it, tells who can speak and who can't speak. But the jury is in total control of that room. And in 1973, if you go back in history, you'll find out they started plea bargaining then. why the old defendant's attorneys couldn't win. Now here in Dallas, if they appoint you one, we found out if you get appointed an attorney and he wins, he gets $500. If he loses, he gets $2,500. Now you know why he shows up the day of the trial. You got no chance, and I'm just telling you that you need to learn how to take care of yourself before you go down there. The issue is never when the feds come in to your house. There is never to go into court. You're feeding yourself right into the system. You go after the agents who came into your house without your permission. They don't have the right to come in there, and this has been proved many times. They have no right to come into your house. They're foreign agents. FBI is not part of the government of we the people. It's not even a part of the federal government. Never has been. CIA has never been part of the government. They just have fed that to you over the years. The FBI was sued, took it and got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said you can't sue them. They don't belong to the government. So it kind of opened our eyes, and we started researching and things, and found out the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, all of the ones who are supposed that you think are taking care of you. They came in through what is called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And this is how they operate in this country, is through the Bretton Woods Agreement. But they have no jurisdiction in Texas nor any other state. They don't have jurisdiction. In the one case that we really got into over that, it finally got into the thing that the 6 of them went down to the courthouse, and they wouldn't even give them their name. Every one of them in there ran from them. That shows you where the jurisdictional thing. They have to have the jurisdiction before they can do anything. When they went in there, every one of them ran except the FBI agent, and they said he was so scared his hands were shaking when they asked for his card. And nothing happened to him. After about 4 hours, the FBI agent said, "Well, you might as well go home," and so he went home. And so when he got home, they faxed him a thing and said, "Come down to the federal building and pick your stuff up and sign for it." And we faxed back to him and said, "No," said the chief of police out here in South Lake, Texas, would like to meet you. He wants to find out who it was that stole this man's merchandise out of his house. So when you come out to bring this back out here, you notify us so we can have the chief of police of South Lake out here." And they faxed back and they said, "That's unacceptable." You see, if they had jurisdiction, if it had jurisdiction to be in that thing, they would not have done that. So we faxed it back and said, well, he can't come down and sign for that. He didn't let you sign for it to begin with. You came in and stole it. And that's exactly the way that it was said to him. And so 4 times they tried to come at midnight and bring the stuff back into the house. And he wouldn't take it. He said, "I'm not signing for it. We can't give it to you unless you sign." He said, "What you're trying to do is get off of a lawsuit." You see, they had no jurisdiction to be in there. The first affidavit we sent to them, they sent back and they said, "Hey, the judge gave us a warrant to come out to his house." Wrote back and said the judge has no jurisdiction to do that. And then it started going back on him, and it actually went back into that court, into that magistrate, and he finally had to, and he was ordered to dismiss it, and he did. But I'm telling you, they do not have the jurisdiction. No federal has jurisdiction over you. In Texas, you have a criminal code called 9.41, 9.42. It says you have the right to defend your property. 9.42 says you have the right to use deadly force if necessary. There never has been one person in the history of Texas that has ever been indicted and convicted of shooting somebody for coming into their house. Never has. Yes.
Even if he's the police?
It doesn't make any difference. No one has the right to come into your house. Now, if you've committed a crime against somebody, the sheriff can come in If you have harmed somebody else, the sheriff can come in, but that's the only reason.
Come in for traffic tickets.
That's the thing you're going to have to fight yourself, because they don't have the right to come in. The problem in the country has all come down to one person, and that is the sheriff. The sheriff has become the sheriff of Nottingham, every one of them. They control everything that goes on in that county. All the drug trade, everything else, they control it all. Once they moved over, because you go back and look at how the sheriffs were set up in the beginning, they were never to deliver commercial paper to the people's house. But yet somehow that got twisted and turned over, and now they're the ones that bring it out all the time. And because they have this badge on, it scares people in all kinds of things. And so they come in and tell people that, that we can do this, we can do this. You see, when it comes down to everything, all your government was set up in every state, was set up by counties. Your government is in your county. It has never been in Austin. It's never been in Washington, because what is down there? The legislature. The people are not to ever be legislated. People cannot be, and so their government was set up in the counties. You have 4 county commissioners. You have a county sheriff. You have a county judge. You have all of your JPs. Now, all of those people are elected only in that county. Nobody else votes for them. In fact, the JPs are elected by their little, where JP number 1, number 2, whatever district they're in. Then you have a county recorder. You have your executive and your judicial in your counties. The legislature is in Austin. The legislature has nothing to do with the people. It only deals with commerce and with other countries. And this is what they're about. They have no jurisdiction whatsoever to ever write a law against the people's rights. None. And so what has happened in this country is that we have believed this stuff, and we started looking at Washington for a handout there, and then Austin started handing out there, and when you look at the way the Republic of Texas government was set up, when it was first set up, and it wasn't until about 1960 or so in there that they really started meeting. They only were scheduled to meet every 2 years. And that was only for about 30 days. So how much business did they have to take care of? 2 years, you'd think, well, the way they do now, you'd think they had, 6 months worth of work to do if you waited 2 years. But that's the way it was set up, because all they were supposed to deal with was foreign governments, other states, and commerce. And so we've let this thing come to where it is now. But the issue in all of it is this third party called they. Nobody. What happens when they write you a letter is they're offering you a contract. And that's where the problem usually starts, because most people don't pay any attention to them. They just throw them over in the trash, or they think they'll go away. Well, maybe the world will come to an end by, June the 5th, and I won't have to face this. And what it is we have been taught to let someone else handle our problems. We have this mentality of my doctor, my lawyer, my preacher, my CPA. We all have that mentality of wanting someone else to do our thinking in that area of our life. And so we know nothing about what's going on. So we get into trouble, and we know nothing about the law and what it's all about. People obey laws. Corporations obey codes, rules, and regulations. If you'll go back and check in 1926, out of New York City comes called the BAR, British Accredited Regency. I don't know why New York is called Regency and the rest of them are called Registry, but they are. they started signing all of the bills and things that coming out of Congress instead of Justice Department. They started codifying and they started copyrighting all of those things. The president of the American Bar out of New York signed all of them instead of the Justice Department. What they were headed to was all these corporations. And when you set up these corporations, you had to have codes, rules, and regulations for them to run by. People don't run by codes, rules, and regulations. They run by law. How you treat another person has nothing to do with codes, rules, and regulations. So then they started convincing people. A city cannot pass a law. It has no legislature. So no one in the county can pass a law. And so what the state did is they said, okay, cities, you can pass codes and rules and regulations to run your cities. But it didn't have anything to do with the people. If the people didn't want to have anything to do with that code, rule, or regulation, they're not obligated to it. But they started telling people, you have to obey the code. It's city code. And I've asked a lot of those guys that come out. I said, it's city code law. And they turn around and walk off. City code is not law, nor is any code law to you. Codes, rules, regulations, codes, statutes are all law, or are all color of law. I had a sheriff down in Delta County. Benny died here last year. He got hooked on all the drugs he was selling to the kids and died. But Benny we knew pretty well, and we sitting in his office one time. He had arrested a friend of mine, and I was sitting there with him. And so I asked him, I said, Benny, he come in, he said, well, fellas, I'm just following procedure. And I said, Benny, you understand procedure's not law, don't you? He said, yes, I do. I said, you know codes, rules, and regulations are not law, don't you, Benny? He said, yes, I do. I said, you know statutes are color of law, don't you? Yes, I do. I said, Benny, you just violated every right that man had. And he jumped up and ran out of the room without saying a word, and he ran into where Lewis was and the old JP. Lewis, we're not violating your rights, are we? He said, the heck you're not. You see, when they arrest you on procedure, where does that say that it's law? Sometimes when you call these people down there at City Hall and they say, well, that's the law, tell them to send you a copy of the law and you'll obey it. And you know what? They won't send you a copy of the law. Yeah, well, do it under the penalty of perjury, but they're not going to do that either. They're not going to swear to anything under the penalty of perjury. No one on that side. Why? Because they're a corporation. They can't. You're separated by a corporation, which is a fiction. And you, we the people, are real living souls. And this is why it gets into the bond issue. Why can you write a bond? Because you're a living soul. You ever realize that you're the one that signs that bond there in the bank? And all you're doing, some banker's sitting there beside you, isn't he? And you sit there and sign that thing. You think that he's the only one that gives it legitimacy. You're the one that gives it the legitimacy, not him. Banks don't have money to loan people. You have credit to give to the bank. And when you sign that document, you give credit to that bank. That's the assets of the bank. They have no assets outside of your credit. Federal Reserve note is death to them. They do not like Federal Reserve notes, so they don't keep too many in their bank. And we found this out pretty plain with Greater Ministries or something out of Florida when I was down there giving a seminar. They had two of the men that had gotten attorneys, and they were fixing it, and I told them, I said, y'all got attorneys, you go in jail. And when they had their trial, they went to jail. What happened was they had 46 million Federal Reserve notes sitting in this warehouse over there, and they was laying all over the table, as on the floor, there's everywhere. They didn't know what to do with them. They kept trying to get the banks there in Florida to take them. None of them would take them. So they flew to New York to the Federal Reserve, and they said, we got $46 million, 46 million your Federal Reserve notes. None of your banks will take them. And they said, well, go back home, and we'll tell you, we'll show you, we'll find you a bank. So about a week later, they get this call, and they said, load that stuff up, and took them 2 of those armored cars. And they said, we got one over here in Denver, little bank over there, and they took all this stuff all the way across the country, arrived there in Denver, and about 2 o'clock they had all that money unloaded into the bank. The next morning they woke up in the newspaper, big headlines, so-and-so bank goes belly up. It bankrupted them. Federal Reserve notes are debt notes. They're death to a bank. The originating of them they used to use Federal Reserve, the greenbacks, the silverback certificates with these Federal Reserve notes. A Federal Reserve note is a debt note. It cannot be used to pay a debt. It's a felony for any government agency, any town, any city, anyone to require, request, or accept Federal Reserve notes in payment of a debt. Now you can offer and they can receive them, but they cannot require them. In HJR 192 it said Federal Reserve notes will not be used in payment of a debt. But it says since the people don't have money to pay their debts with, the government or the Treasury will pay your debts dollar for dollar. And what they're saying in there, that any time you went in to buy something, you simply signed a promise to pay. Now that promise to pay went into that bank. What did the bank have to do with it? Nothing. They just got the credit, came from the Treasury, and they said that person now owns that house. But what do the banks do? They grab the deed of trust, and they put a trustee on that thing. And then they start charging you interest on what? On your credit. That's your credit, not theirs. And this was made real plain in a little case of 2 little farmers out in West Texas. Sued the bank, been doing business with them for 30 years. They laid it out in such a form that you can't miss it, and I handed that out one day in here. And if you want a copy of it, you'll have to get it from Larry. But in it, they lay it out exactly. They said, this banker told us he could loan us money. And we found out he didn't have any money to loan us. And for 30 years, he told us he could loan us money. And every year we'd go down, time that we needed the money, and he would, they'd give us $30,000 or $40,000, and then we found out that was ours. And then they started charging us interest on it. Made us put up warrants against all of our equipment, which is not their equipment. And he said, and so they said, and so the bank committed fraud. And they won on all counts because they laid it out in such a manner that you and I could understand it. This is what they do to you. Until you understand the money system in this country, you will not understand anything else they're doing to you. Because it's unlike, you think you're paying something. You realize you've never paid for a thing? You have nothing to pay with. You show me what you're paying with. Somebody gives you a bill. What are you going to pay with a bill? You have nothing to pay with. What you do is discharge. And it's with credit. Credit. You have to produce the credit. Then along came, and then in their plan, and this thing started in 33. All of that started, they then promised to pay the bills of the people or to pay their debts dollar for dollar. So it meant it had to be a debt to you before you could go to the Treasury and say, issue credit to them. And so what happened was that in 1938 they had a ruling out of the Supreme Court. And it was called Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, where there is no contract, there is no case, and they drew all the people away from their common law into the contract law, commerce. That also brought into this country the most dreaded thing in the world, and that's what's called law merchants. Law merchants is a silent contract. And the silent contract gives to the writer of the letter a summary judgment in anything that they write. Say the city writes to you and says that they're going to charge you $200 a day because you're not cutting your grass. If you don't cut the grass and do what they tell you to and notify them exactly the way that letter says, they'll have you in the court, and the judge will read off verbatim what the city had wrote to you. We're going to charge you $200 a day because you didn't comply with what we said. Now, why could that happen? You go in there and try to argue something. Why did that happen? Because they had a summary judgment coming in, and you had to prove you didn't intend to not cut that grass, and that's impossible to do. And so the law merchants came in 1938. In 1946, they have this thing called the Administrative Procedures Act. It was called at that time the fourth branch of government, all written outside the Constitution. Although they had one line in there that said everybody knows that you can't write a law against the rights of the people. And then that kind of faded out after a while. But the Administrative Procedures Act then was voted on by all the different states, and in 1973, all of your courts and everything else went under the Administrative Procedures Act, and this is where they operate. The Administrative Procedures Act went into the court on one side, what you call admiralty, which admiralty just means it's like somebody that has a stick that hits you on the head and makes you do what they want you to. And so in all of this, the administrative procedure went into effect, gave the judge the right to rule in whatever way he wanted to. They changed the intent and put it with a charge, took the innocent plea away, and the reason they had to do all of that is if you win a case, you can sue the prosecuting attorney because he brought you into court. That's why they had to do it. They had to make it where, and most people don't know that they can sue the prosecuting attorney when they win a case if they're a defendant. You sue him because he's the one who has violated your rights. And so they had to close everything down. Well, at that point, all you have now is an administrative procedure. You're having an administrative hearing, and I defy any of you, take any of those documents you get out of the court and read them. And all it will talk about is a hearing. It's all it talks about. On this date, says, greetings, you've been sued. On so-and-so date, you're hereby invited to a hearing on the above matter. Doesn't say you're invited to a hearing in this court. It says you're invited to a hearing in this matter, case number so-and-so. And it goes on to tell you all that. And every time when they write something out of the court, it will be about a hearing. You're simply getting at that point an administrative hearing. Out of the judge's chambers, the administrative hearing, he can make up any rules he wants to for that court. That's why you cannot use any law. Why in the world do you think you go in there and you put this motion into the court and they say denied? Why do you think they do that? You're trying to bring a third party in there, and you can't do it either. And we don't make the third parties get out of it. As soon as the prosecutor starts talking, the thing you need to do is stand up and say, Judge, hold on a minute. That guy over there, I don't know him. I've never met him before in my life. He is a third party to this. He don't have first-hand knowledge. So I don't want him in here talking against me. He's representing me, and I'm going to fire him. You realize in 1980, it's in the criminal code, they put into the law books that the attorneys represent both sides of the court. Now you know why you go in there and you think you're Perry Mason, and you go into that court and they clobber you just like if you weren't Perry Mason, if you were or weren't or whatever. Why? Because the prosecuting attorney is representing you. If you'll read their documents, you'll see they're representing you. Had one that came to us so clear the other day. They wrote back to this man. They said, "Dear Mr. So-and-so, you know, we have been hired to represent this company, and you're not to send any more of your papers to that company." You see what I'm talking about? They're telling you what to do. They're representing you. And so you will do this, this, and this. And what did the man do? He wrote across it. He said, "Accepted and returned to you for closure in this case. If you think you're representing me, you're fired." Never has heard from that law firm since. It cost them about $25,000 to hire that character. He got one letter. Now the company is bare again. What are they going to do with it? You see, you have to understand what they're doing, and they're simply taking you to the cleaners by what you say. Everything we say can and will be held against us. Now, there's another side to that declaring and saying. Anything you say, you never back down from it. You never tell them. Do they ever tell you that they're wrong? How many times have you seen some poor old boy get up there and he's been in prison for 16 years, and they've had for 10 years, they've had all kinds of evidence showing that he never should have been in that courtroom to begin with? How many times have you seen that? Have any of these district attorneys ever admitted we were wrong in doing that? No. They say, "Oh, no, we know he was guilty. We tried him and the jury found him that way," and they'll stick with that story. Why would you back down on something that you state, something that you say, something that you write? Do you know that when you do, you've admitted you've written a false document? I've seen this over the years, and it's so funny. Guys will put a lien against a judge or file charges on him or do something. Boy, and the first thing you know, they get these threatening things. They get called into this other judge's office. If you don't take those things away from him, if you don't release those liens you got on him, we're going to file charges on you and we're going to give you this much time in jail. And the guys go out and take them off, and the charge against them is filing a false document against somebody. Why? The instant you come back and say, "You see, in this world, in common law, your word is your bond. Whatever you speak, it must be true, or it is a lie. It cannot be both." And so what happens is, once you write something and you speak it, and you write these bonds, don't you ever let anyone tell you that the bonds are no good. Who can tell you that? Well, I've got a book over here. It says right here that bonds have to be written this way. And if you believe that, you'll say, "Oh, I guess I made a mistake. I want to take that bond back." Now you've written a false document, you see. Because what is this book over here? Third party. Did anybody live 6,000 years ago? Was you there when Adam and Eve was in the garden? Nobody really knows what happens except what was written in a book. And what was written about history by other people. And history is always written usually from the eyes of the victor. And so they write it one way, and it may be exact opposite of the way it happened. So getting something out of a book is not law. Do you understand that the Black's Law thing that's been going all these years, everybody always quoted it, and they came out the other day and admitted it's all a hoax?
Black's Law Dictionary.
Yeah, Black's Law Dictionary. They said it's all a hoax, and everybody goes around and for years has been quoting what? Black's Law, and what was it all these years? A hoax. Books don't mean anything. It only means something to you when you write it, read it, and you can read it and you say, "Hey, This means this to me. Why don't everybody believe the Bible? Because they read it and they say, it ain't for me. Another guy reads it and he says, hey, I like this. You see, it's what you put your faith in, and that's what you build, what you speak on. So if you're going to get into something with somebody, then speak what's in here. Don't bring in a book. Don't start quoting to me out of the Bible. It better be inside of you. Don't quote to me, the Bible says this, because that's the interpretation of your interpretation of what you think of that. It may be true, it may not be true, but that's how people have been foxed all these years. Now over 900 different churches. Which one's right? I don't know. I know what I believe, and I know my faith, and that's what I go on. But as to what's in a book does not establish. And so what is in you is what establishes who you are. And you have to understand that, because nobody can make you say otherwise. As I told you, I'd been talking about this legal determination for 2 or 3 years. And all of a sudden, this lady I was helping do some things on a tax thing. She went in, she was trying to find a document. So she went in this law office, wandered in off the street. So the attorney heard her in there, and he came out there, and he said, why are you looking for that? And she told him, he said, you know, I think that, and by what she was asking for, he had a clue that she was not of the regular ilk, you know. And so she said, you know, he said, that might work. I never thought of that. And for no reason whatsoever, he just said, you know, if people in this country ever understand that everything is by legal determination, they'll turn the country right side up. And he turned around and walked off. He knew she was from this ilk. And so that's the reason he told her that. Nobody can make you make a legal determination. No one can make it for you. I've written hundreds of letters to district attorneys, and everybody knows how bad they are. Criminal district attorneys, they call themselves. They may be. I don't. I'm just telling you what they call themselves. They call it, and it's right over their letter, criminal district attorney, and that's the way it says. Now, when they write to you, everybody knows, don't you have to do what the district attorney says? I mean, isn't that? No. Always we write back to them and say, hey, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you came from. You've got to be from a foreign venue and jurisdiction somewhere. You know, you've got to be a third-party debt collector. I'm not going to give you permission to make a legal determination for me. In fact, if you think you're representing me, you're fired. And I have done many, 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 many of them. And not one of them to this day has ever written back. Not one of them. And that was verified by an attorney who was at a family reunion. And so one of the guys was talking about, this attorney keeps calling me every day, boy, and he just does this, 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 and this. And this attorney walked by, and without hardly missing a beat, he says, next time he calls, just tell him he's fired. And it struck me, and that's what it was all about. And so, sure enough, we started firing them. And sure enough, they stayed fired. You see, they can't make a legal determination because it is a commercial crime for them to try to practice law if you haven't given permission. You have to give them permission to practice law. They cannot practice law without your permission concerning you. So if they're representing you, then they can practice law. If you signed on with them and say, I want them to represent me, then you can sign and they can practice law. All crimes are commercial crimes. Says so in CFR 2711 if you want to believe that. All crimes are commercial, and it goes on to list them. And it tells, and starts out prostitution, murder, stealing, drugs. It lists all those things. Why are they all? And it started dawning on me. I kept reading that thing. And I said, why are these commercial crimes? And then it dawned on me, in commerce, you have to have a license to do something. You have to have a license to do anything. So in order to practice prostitution, you have to have a license. In order to kill somebody, you have to have a license. And no one has a license to do that, except the government. But anyway, you have to have a license. So the attorney must have a license to practice law. He does not graduate with a license to practice law. He graduates with a bar card and a certificate. And the Supreme Court says he can go out and practice law. Where'd the Supreme Court ever get into legislation? Where'd they become the legislature? I thought they were created by the legislature. And yet here they are telling these attorneys that they're licensed to practice law. What that means is that they cannot represent you without your permission. So what I'm trying to explain to you about all this is you got to understand that you're more powerful. If you've seen the movie, The Matrix, you understand what that guy found out at the end of the movie, that he was more powerful than 10,000 agents. He was more powerful than anyone because he had finally figured out who he was. And he figured out that what he said was what went, not what they said. And so he quit believing what they said. You see, the more you believe what somebody else says, the weaker you become. And the more you believe yourself, the stronger you become and the weaker they get. And this is what you have to come to. You are the one who speaks. Why do you think the Creator said you have the right to get up and declare? But whatever you say will remain for eternity. And it's true. Do you know that when we leave here tonight, that they've got machines that they can come in this room 2 days later and record everything that was said in here tonight? Yeah, they do. And so don't ever think you can have a secret meeting somewhere that they can't come in and find out what you said. But this is how strong of what I'm telling you is, of your declaration of what you want. You see, as long as you speak the truth, it stands forever. It's when you get into taking a third party in, a third party is a liar, always a liar. And the third party comes into your conversation, what happens to your truthful conversation? It becomes a lie. Because you can't mix a lie with the truth and get truth. You can't do it. Truth will overcome a lie, but it will not mix with it. And so what I'm telling you is who you are, each one of you in here. If everybody in here understood all of this and practiced it every day, I guarantee you'd turn the whole state of Texas upside down. Because this is where it is. It's within each one of us. And I'm not telling you I'm not, trying to be a coach and rah you into anything. Your life is never going to be satisfied until you understand this. Till you come to understand your freedom. That everybody is free. Only people who think they're put into prison, that's where they go. And I have a friend of mine gets out May the 7th, teaching people how to fill out a W-4 form so the government wouldn't get everything they are supposed to get. He got 8 years, about 9 of them got 8 years plus 3. So he gets out May the 7th, I think it is. And I've been talking to him all this time, and he has really remained upbeat. He said, if you're the only one out there who's still trying to do something, it was worth me going to prison. And that's the way he always felt. And so Charles has had fun while he's been in there. He said one night he said all of the prisoners were really giving this one guard a hard time. I mean, they were really giving him a hard time. And he said, hey fellas, don't you understand something? This guard is really the prisoner. Do you realize that he has to watch us at night to make sure nobody gets in here and hurts us while we're sleeping? And he said, and he makes sure we get food every day, and he makes sure we get clean clothes and all this other stuff.
And no fighting.
And them guys said, you know, you're right. And that guard said, man, I like you. so it kind of straightened that out. But Charles got onto this thing about the name. So he and this other man who are in the same prison together, they went for the same reason, and so they happened to end up, both of them ended up. And so they got together and they on this all capital letter name. And so for 3 nights straight, the guard would come in and call his name, and he'd say, is that in all capital letters? Yes, it is. That ain't me. So they told him, they said, if you say that again, you're going in the hole. And so the next night they said it again, so both of them got chunked in the hole. They don't really get put in solitary. It's a big old place down there. It just doesn't have anybody in it. But they said it really wasn't bad because you get some time by yourself. You know, so he said it's like throw me into the briar patch, you know, throw the rabbit into the briar patch, you know. Now I get some time to myself. But anyway, Charles is getting out tonight, and it's going to be good to see him. But he's kept his faith. He's kept his you know. Every time I ask, oh, we're doing fine, you know, everything's great. And so probably won't know him because just like me, he's gotten about 5, 6 years older. So, but anyway, it's going to be good to talk to him. But anyway, in all of this, I kind of started learning a lot of this, and as I would travel around the country when I started teaching the redemption. And Sam Davis and myself were the two that started out doing this, and so all this stuff started coming in, and as you help people, things fit in, pieces start fitting together. And let me say this about, you know, I have people that are in here, they'll call me and they say, I've got this person that's in trouble. Can you help them? And why are you here? See, you need to get down and try to help that person as much as you can, because I'm just one people, and I've helped many, so many I can't, and I'm not bragging about it. I'm glad that I get them, but there's so much time. And right now I'm into something else. You can see I got red hands up to here. That means I've been out in the sun. My face is red, and so we're putting something together, and so it requires a lot of time out in the sun. And before I sat behind that computer and I got white, you know. Indians turn white too. So, but anyway, so if you try to help them yourself, and you'll be surprised how far you can get with them. And then as you help them, you're going to start understanding, and you're going to start putting your twist to it. Had some people over in North Carolina, they called me and they said, hey, we got this book over here called The Matrix. Well, The Matrix is my book written by Ann Sims. Ann Sims I used to work with her quite a bit until she got into some problems with personal problems. So anyway, Ann took my book and she wrote it in the way she wanted to. And people will call me sometimes and they'll say, hey, do you mind if I help you? Do you have anybody that does your grammar and all this other? And I said, no. Well, would you like for someone to help? And I said, wait a minute now. That's my book as long as I have it. If I give it to you, it's your book. You correct all the grammar in it you want to. But I speak a certain way, and I only understand myself this way. And I did make good grades in high school in English. Did in college, but not in English. It's a different English altogether. But, you know, I could care less what you do with that book when I give it to you. Write and call it The Fox Hunt or something, whatever you want to, and write it the way you want to. Put it in the order you want to. Where do you think I got most of it? From somebody else. And I started piecing it together. And if it helps you, then take it and give it away and do with it what you want to. It's not my book. The reason my name is not on it. You know, I think this is crazy. You know, go out and write a book and claim that, you know, write my name on it. Most people don't write books anyway. They have ghostwriters that write them. They furnish the information, they don't write them. But that's true. And I knew one man that he taught, and I mean, he was He was a preacher of sorts, and he was all time coming down on all these guys that are writing all these books. He says there's only one book, it's here. And so all of a sudden one day he wrote a book, but he didn't write it. One of the men that went to the deal wrote it. And all of a sudden he became like the ones he had been criticizing. He thought he had done something when all he did was took something out of a book. And that's literally what we do. And all I want to do is try to make it simple to where people can understand it, because we are made simple people, and what we've done is we have made things so complicated because we've added all these books to it, and you can't add books to the truth. Try to understand that anything you read in a book is only true if you believe it's true out of that book, then accept it as true, and that's your truth out of that book. But don't go around and use that book against somebody else. Just argue your case from what comes out of here. This is what I believe. Once you bring the third party in it, that's when the fight starts. It really is. That's when people get mad. Because how do they know how to, they don't know that book. They don't know what's in that thing. They don't believe what's in there. And here you are quoting out of a book, and they have no way to refute it. And so the best thing is just tell them, say, hey, throw the third party out unless you and I keep talking. Because third parties are what kill you. And he's called they. Leave they out of it. They has killed all of us. We say they will get us if we do this. And I say to people, who are they? They never can explain to me. Which is the bonds, which is the freedom. You see, in 1950, is when really the thing started, the charade that they've got going now started. The stock market was just a little old bitty thing. It really didn't, you could take and go down to a broker and he'd give you the stock certificates at that time, but you gave them the money and you owned the stock certificates, and if your company was buying them, they'd send them to you. They don't do that anymore. They're all owned by one company up in New Jersey. But they started that in 1950. They gave us, if you've ever been to the slot machines and pulled a one-armed bandit, that's exactly what they're doing to us. You're only going to earn so many assets in your life. And most people gear their life to the point that they think they're going to retire and they're going to have this much money to live on for the rest of their life. They don't take into effect this thing called taxes. They don't take into effect this thing called interest. And so in 1950, you say from 1950 to 1960, the slot machine gave us 3 gold coins and it took one away from us. That's pretty good. We come out 2 ahead. Well, in 1960 to 1970, they gave us 3 coins and they took 2 away from us. So now we're still 1 ahead. 1970 to 1980, they gave us 3 and they took 3 away. And if you don't believe this, go back and look at this periods of time and you'll see you start sliding back into having nothing. 1980 to 1990, they gave you 2 and they took 3. 1990 to 2000, they give us 1 and they're taking 3. And that's the reason people are getting into debt. That's the reason, they're going under, simply because all these years they've been paying these $3,000, $5,000 taxes on their houses, which have never been lawful from the beginning. The bonds work easier on taxes than they do anything else. Got a report from North Carolina. One man, he filed a 1041. He got back $250,000. He filed for every year that he had ever put anything into the income tax. He filed that 1041 and put on there every year that he had got. In other words, he included all and he had paid in $250,000 in his lifetime. And they sent him a check back for $250,000. Why? You never were supposed to pay income tax to begin with. You were set up as a trust when you got your Social Security number. That is a trust number. They created a little trust called Alva R. McLeod Jr. in the Social Security, and they appointed a number for that thing. So the proper form you're to file is a Form 1041. The reason for that is you're the fiduciary, the trustee of your trust. And so a fiduciary never pays income tax on what he earns off a trust. He don't pay income tax. The reason attorneys love to have those trusts, the reason they like to get a hold of them. Had one lady, I read her trust, and it was the most beautiful trust I'd ever seen in my life, barring nobody's. And in the way it was written, the format, everything. But if you read it, what had happened is the attorney that wrote it for her made himself privy to her bank account, to all of her assets whenever he wanted to get them, whatever he wanted to do, and she had signed a power of attorney over to him to do that. And I told her I read that thing, and I said, did you ever read this? Well, no, I just trusted him. And I said, do you see what the fox is doing? I said, he can walk into your bank account, and he can take your money. And she read that, and she said, well, what I'd do? And I said, well, I'd fire him, but that's up to you. So she did. And so now, you know, she's fiduciary of her trust. So what happens is, when you fill that 1041 out, it simply says, amount of money earned this year. And then it says, fiduciary fee. Amount of money you earned, fiduciary fee is the same. If you paid any into the system, there's a place down there, and you put it on there. You do not tell them what kind of trust you're filing. They sometimes will write to you and say, do you want us to send you an EIN number? Accepted, returned to you for closure in this matter. I don't want your EIN number. I gave you the number that I want you to have. You see what I'm telling you? They will try to trick you into saying that what you filed is no good. And if you get an EIN number, now you are under different rules and regulations, and you're not going to get a thing back. But everything is predicated. It has on one side, it has about 10 or 12 trusts, different kinds of trusts. And if you check that thing, then you come under the rules and regulations of that trust, and they're going to come after you on that trust. But if you just file it as a trust and don't put anything on there, you have stated, this is my trust, and this is what I am getting back, and there's not a thing they can do about it. And they send your money back. I can't tell you how many people all over the country have called me and told me they're getting their money back. Huh? Well, last night I understand there was a line 10 miles long. People were rushing down there to get those things. You know, and I don't understand that. Why not file it on the 16th or the 17th? You know, me to sit down that line till 3 o'clock in the morning getting that thing, you know, sitting there. That's crazy. They said it had to be there by midnight, and we're going to hold the post office open till all y'all get up here and do it. We make exceptions to the rules, see. Have you ever, if you would, write your questions down, Froggy. Yes, 1040 form is a bootleg form, but to argue all that stuff, you know, you can't argue it. It don't hold water with them. What you have to do is if you want to file a 1040 and that's the way you want to go, file that 1040, just write your name and your address, your Social Security number, then put all your papers in an envelope with a note to them and address it to Ladd Ellis, the area director over here in Dallas, and say the Secretary of Treasury told me you would fill out these papers for me, and you'd return them to me under the penalty of perjury. And you'd be surprised what you get back. You don't owe anything. You see? Because they're supposed to file under the penalty of perjury under Section 6065. What this is of 1040 is a reverse contract is what it is. It's you're filling out somebody else's contract and then sending it to them and saying, I'm agree to this contract before you even see it. And I'm going to do it under the penalty of perjury. So the income tax is, we found out, is really the easiest thing in the world to deal with. It's just people are so afraid that those IRS agents are going to get me. You know, when I first started, yeah, and they are foreign agents. I had a friend of mine that I work with, and he got a call one day at the office, and his wife said, there's 8 agents, 8 IRS agents out here on the porch. He won't pay taxes to anybody. He just never has. And so he jumped in his car and he ran home, and he parked his car out in the middle of the street, and he went running up on his porch, and he says, what are you people doing on my private property? Well, we're with the IRS. And he said, I didn't ask you who you was with. I want to know why you doing on my property. And they opened their coat to get him a card and let him see their guns, and he said, I'm not afraid of your guns. I'm going in the house to get mine, and I'm going to shoot anybody that's on my property when I come out here. And he said all 8 of them took off running. He said the women took off their high heels, and they took off running out across the grass. He said that was funny. He said all 8 of them, and this has been over 6 years ago, and they've never been back. Never have done anything to him. And so what I'm telling you is, and they say he owes lots of money, but he don't. So that's the way it is. But so when you get,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When we're getting into these bonds, what I'm trying to teach you is that when you write the bond, it's done. Don't sit there and say, well, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what they're doing. You see? You don't do that. You wrote the bond. If you don't believe in it, don't write it. Don't you understand? If you don't believe in something, don't do it. If you believe in the bond and you're going to write the thing, then who can tell you the bond is no good? They can. They can, that third party. And we've gotten some answers back, you know, well, code so-and-so says that bond isn't written right. They didn't send the bond back. We just wrote across it and said, accepted, return foreclosure in this matter. If you think you're representing me, you're fired, and we send it back to them. It is the game of playing why. You ever sat down with a kid, a smart-aleck kid? And I don't know that I ever did that, but I had it done to me a lot of times. You try to explain something to them. You coach enough little kids in baseball, football, and basketball, and you'll get that. And you tell them, the kids say, why? And so you think he's really asking you why. So you explain some more, and he says, why? And you say to him, shut up, and he says, why? You know, and you can't, and this is really what you're doing when you're saying, they're trying to get into your business. You see, nobody can get in your commercial business unless you want them in there.
That's right.
Nobody. They have no jurisdiction to make a legal determination for you. And so what you're simply saying to them, I'm accepting and return to you foreclosure in this matter. If you're representing me, you're fired. What have you just done to them? Why? Why? And I've had letters where they said, we don't want a contract. This thing is, you know, we just, and I told you the lady owed $100,000, or that's what they told her she owed. They told her. But when they got the bond, all of a sudden, he had no authority to tell her to pay that. He had no authority to tell her to do anything. And so he backed completely out of it, wrote to his company and told them, says, don't you let any letters get through from her to me. Just leave me out of this. And they said, okay, and they gave him a copy of, her a copy of his letter, and they said, oh, by the way, you owe us $42.35. So guess what happened to the letter? Thank you for your offer of contract. It's accepted, and we're returning it to you for closure of this matter. Each of $42.35. Don't have nothing to do with us, see. You don't have to take that from them. You accept it. See, in commerce, it's really a funny thing. The Universal Commercial Code, which it's all under, simply says when you accept something from somebody, you have honored. If you deny it, you've dishonored. Now the fight starts. So the thing to do is accept it from them. It becomes your instrument. You now own that letter, and you can write and then write your terms to the contract and say, I'm returning it to you for this reason. When you tell them whatever you want to add to the contract, and then you sign it and date it. And that's the end of the thing. Okay, we better start. Rice, what was the name of the court case where the two farmers, it's called Ashley. It's two, in fact, Nancy Ashley is a good friend of mine, and they're kin to her. Her father was a farmer, and they were from Rawls, Texas. They were farmers, and anyway, she's kin to them. But their names are Ashley, and if you want to get that from Larry, Larry has the case. I've got it, but I cannot look all that up. Please talk about Greenspan's Jubilee and how we can use it. That's what you're doing with the bonds. He don't know it. He don't like it, but that's what you're doing. Do you get a closed bank account for payment? Don't do that. They are arresting people and everything on closed bank accounts. Those are on the on your corporate side of the ledger. So anytime you take a closed bank account and use it, you're creating a debt. You can't create a debt. Only the corporation can create a debt. When you create a debt, you're in their venue and jurisdiction, and they come arrest you because you have created a debt. That's what it's about. When you write a hot check, you created a debt. You can only create credit. And that's where we get in trouble, is we jump from the credit side over to the debt side. And we think we're a debtor because the banks convinced us when we signed that promissory note that now we got to pay them. And that has never been the intent. The intent in the beginning was that if people come down and bought something, that since they took the gold away from us, this was going to be on a paper situation, they would pay the debts dollar for dollar. And Greenspan's Jubilee, he's the one that made that statement. When 9/11 happened and the building went down in the top 3 floors of that first building, not the first one that fell, but the first building that got hit, the top 3, 4 floors of that building was all owned or was by the companies that traded all the bonds all over the world. $70 trillion a year they traded. It was the only company that was destroyed in those fires. Every person was killed in that bond company up there, except the president. He just happened to be, he had to go take his daughter to school that morning. Everybody else was killed, but and Greenspan then came and said, this is our Jubilee. And what he meant by that is all the debts, because the bonds went against them, all the debts were now erased, and somebody's going to have to come prove that they had those bonds because they were all up in those top 4 floors. So that's what he meant by that. Rice, I have a mobile home in a trailer park that I paid off with a bond. You better fasten it down. You didn't do anything wrong, but what they'll do is they'll come out sometime. You may feel it lurching at night when you're asleep in there. But you see, on all of this, you can do a house, you can do credit cards, And I know credit cards, I know one of the men in here said he had a $5,000 limit, and he did a bond on his credit card, and so they sent it back to him zero, but they also cut his credit down from 5,000 to 500. So now he only has 500 he can do. And I'm sure if he does that 500 and he does another bond, they'll cut it off. But says, I cannot find an electric company, any other than CoServe, that provides electricity to that park. The electric company will not provide electric to the, I can't read that, something home unless I produce a lease agreement between me and the park. What do you suppose? I don't know. Well, you're saying you paid that off, and now you want somebody to put your electricity in?
Well,
Is that?
The electricity provided to the park.
Uh-huh.
The electric company is refusing to have their electric turned on unless I produce a lease between me and the mobile home park.
Well, you can make an agreement between you and the mobile home park where it does not give them anything that would be at a detriment to you. You can write your own contract. Write them a contract and take it to them. Say, I'll make this agreement with you. And see what they say. See, that's the way you always do. Always take their contracts. If you don't like something in a contract, the bank or anybody, just cross out what you don't like. You don't have to sign that thing just because they have it all like that. You're not required to agree to everything in the contract, but most people, they want that house so bad that they'll just sit there and they won't read it, and they'll just sit and they'll just see, he says, sign here, you're friendly banker, and you sign right there, and you've done everything in the world to yourself. But I just make up my own contract and take it to them. One that would not get you, that would deal with you and where you are. And then see what they say, and then negotiate with them. What would it take for me to make an agreement with you? Outside of you taking my you don't give anybody the right to come on this property and take my trailer home. See? Had to convey title back to owner, penal code 3005 under tech. Why are you quoting me codes? See, if you knew what was doing at that time, you operate in the common law. And I've had them to quote codes to me all the time, and the instant you write back to them, say, I don't know who you are, codes, rules, and regulations. If you're supposed to obey them, you should obey them. I tell them district attorneys all the time, if you're supposed to obey codes, rules, and regulations, you obey them. I'm not subject to codes, rules, and regulations. Don't give you permission to make me subject to them. And they quit. So, as them conveying your house back to the original owner is just something so they can do this, what they're doing to all of us, using these codes to protect the corporations. And so at that time, you should have just told them that the code doesn't apply to me. And then, of course, we know now he could have wrote a bond to them. I might not even be able to read this from my glasses. Huh? Robert Sparkman, pickup Patrick's notebook. Okay.
Oh.
That was a private note. You wasn't,
okay. All right,
you wasn't
got it.
supposed to hear that.
So don't believe anything you read today is what I think it said.
That's not to me either. That almost gets more personal there. I'm afraid. I mailed my 1041 off. I have a return coming. The IRS sent me a letter telling me the law requires me to have an IN. They told me to fill in the form. Sure they will. And you just write across it, accepted, because you don't want to deny it. Now you got a problem. You accept it and return it to them for closure in this matter. Send me my money. assigned to me to send it back in. I know this EIN puts me back in their jurisdiction. It puts you in their jurisdiction simply because you're doing what they tell you to do. Not because they can do that to you. It's because you're telling them, I believe that, so you can put me back in your jurisdiction. Okay? Do not just write across that thing, accept it, and return to you for closure. You're not going to hear anything else from them. When you pay your car with a bond and keep paying the note, why would you do that? When you pay your car with a bond and keep paying the note, how do you know when the bond has paid the car off? The bond paid the car off the day you wrote it and sent it to them. See, what a car is even more scary than a trailer home, because you really have to watch those things. They can only steal them from you from that point on, and they'll tell you. And you know, before I'd do that, I'd write to every towing place in town and tell them, whatever offer you get from the bank, I'll double it. Because what they do is they grab your car when you're asleep at night. More towing people get killed in Texas than any other thing, because they get caught out there in the parking lot about 4 o'clock, on your driveway about 4 o'clock in the morning, hooking up to your car. Yeah, and you can put a UCC1, but they'll still haul it off. What I'm telling you is that they've been more of them killed in Texas, and they have big meetings all the time of all the towing people to figure out how to get around that thing, but you can't. It's a game. And my son-in-law got his took one time. My daughter drove it to work, and she looked out the window, and they were hooking up to it and hauling it off. And so he went out there where it was, and they had a big chain link fence around it with barbed wire sticking this way over it, and about 3 huge guard dogs there waiting at the door, and this man standing there with a shotgun laying across the thing. He said, if you want your car, come in and get it. And so he decided he didn't want his pickup that bad, so he didn't go in and get it. But if you're going to write the bond, then don't write the notes. I mean, don't keep sending them notes, because you're saying the bond's no good. Write the bond leave it open, let them sign it, let them fill in the blank. How do you remove the items off your credit report that were paid off with a bond? Did they put, when you paid someone with a bond, did they put that on your credit report?
No.
Huh? No, they won't do it. What they'll get you for is when you don't make payments like you said you would. Then they put it on your credit report, and that is when you can do a copyright on that name, and you send it to them. You say, if I hear any more out of you, I'm going to bill you for $1 million for everything. Every time I call somebody and they say I've got a bad credit report, you're getting billed for $1 million. They stop. They somehow it disappears out of their files. Rice 1041 form for multiple years or one form per year. This man did it all on one form. I'm not telling you how to do that 1041. People are always, and I'm not going to get into that. You want to do it, you do it. I know what I did, and none of y'all were standing there with me, so you got to sweat it out. There are people who can help you with it, but that's one thing I will not get in to help you with. But it has been, and I can give you names of people if you want to call them, and there's a guy in Houston I know that his nephew is the guy that I work with, lives in Houston, and he wanted a book, and so Don sent him a book one time, and he said his nephew said he came in there and he said, hey, he said, I found in here you can fill this 1041 out, and on a lark, I'm going to try it. He said, well, I can't do it because they'll get me. But he said, if you ever get a check back, you come show me. And in about 4 or 5 months here, he came in with about a $6,000 check, and he said, I need to come to one of your meetings. And this was the guy that owned the company. So anyway, Working to keep city from annexing me or my property, addressed to who? Can this be done before copyright and UCC? I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with what you write and proclaim and put and file into the county record, that you don't want to become a part of it and you refuse to, and then send it to all the parties involved and tell them your property is not to be taken in. But it has to be done through an affidavit filed into the county records. If you make an agreement to pay a down payment on a piece of property and agree to make payment, but due to illness or out of work and cannot make payment to the private owner, do you lose everything? Yes. If you make that with another person, if he's not with a corporation, you can't do this to him. A private contract between two people cannot be broken for no reason. The thing that you need to do is go talk to the man that you made the agreement with and try to get him to alter the contract. See, because your word is your bond between people. And so if you've agreed to something, you need to stick with it. The right way to do that is, you get in trouble like that, is go to them and explain it to them and tell them, hey, would you alter the contract and let's do it this way, and see what he says. And it's possible that he might want you to keep it and he might do it, but you can't give him a bond for it. That's where the people that did the CMOs started getting in trouble. They started giving them to people. And that's where they got in trouble. Because what they were doing was according to the banking laws, but you can't give them to people, and what the Fed started doing then was going buying those from those people they gave them to. Now they couldn't defend them. See, somebody has to defend that thing and say it is good. And once they buy it, it belongs to them. They said it wasn't any good. So they could say that. Do you just put any number for the trust? No, you put your Social Security number. The first two numbers of your Social Security number is written just like a trust number. And then the other 7 numbers go on the other side, the little hyphen. Can you file a UCC-1 for house taxes in the state of Connecticut? Why would you want to file? Why don't you just write them a bond? On taxes, don't file a UCC-1 and try to get out of them. You're not going to get out of them. All you're doing is filing a claim on that property. It has nothing to do with the taxes. Tax on the phone was put care of the people by fraud. Spanish something war was never. Who wrote that? I don't know what it says. Maybe you can tell me what it says. Do you put all previous years on the 1041, or do you? We've already answered that. You can do it either way. You can make up one for each year, or you can do it all in 1 year. And that's what he did. He did it all in 1 year. I mean, he just put it all on one form and sent it in. Every one of them he had ever done. He went back and found out everything he had paid into them. $250,000.
The question is it true that a federal tax on the phone was put to the people to fund the Spanish-American War and was never removed?
This I don't know. It says, is it true that federal tax on the phone was put to the people to fund the Spanish-American War and was never removed? I don't know. Somebody may know that. You research it. People like to get on the internet. I don't know. Has anyone successfully had a bond processed by anyone you sent it to? What do you mean had it processed? Yeah. One lady called me and she said she called Puerto Rico. She got hold to somebody down there, and they said, we got more of these bonds and we don't know what they're about and we don't know what to do with them. But we got them all. You see, what it is, what you're doing is simply saving your assets. You've been giving them to them. You earned them all your life, and now as you start getting older, they start taking them all away from you simply because we don't know that they become, anytime something becomes a debt, you don't owe anything. If it becomes a debt to you, you don't owe it. There are no debtors' prisons. And what happens go into court is people go in there and the judge said, okay, we're going to find you guilty and we're going to give you a year in jail and this and this and I ain't, you know, and he says throw him in jail. Where did he get that from? There's no debtor's prison. He didn't tell him that he didn't have any money to pay the debt with. He was arguing with him about all this other stuff. You can't do that, you know, and he said, watch me. The issue is that they know we can pay. And under the law merchants, if you can pay and refuse to, you are put into jail until you pay what you owe or agree to pay. And we go in there shaking our, I ain't paying you, I ain't paying you. So they say, okay, you're going to sit in there till you decide to pay us. And this is what it's all about.
Right, it's like old Puerto Rico twice today.
Did you?
The first time, the lady, when I asked if Manuel Diaz,
He's not there.
was the Secretary of the Treasury, I got no other word out of her, period. I mean, it was dead silence, never said another word. So I called back, and I through the voicemail, I went to the Treasury Department, got a different lady, and the same result. They just don't respond.
Yeah. See, they know what's happening, and it's no different than the acceptance for value. What we didn't know in the acceptance for value when we was teaching it is what we know now about writing across there, accepted, returned to you for closure. That's all you have to do with an accepted for or a bill of exchange, because it's the same thing. It's a promise to pay. You say, if I live to be 500 years old one of these days, if we ever get gold and silver back, I'm going to pay you. That's the only time you're ever going to pay someone is when you get gold and silver. Anytime the money has an intrinsic value. If it has no intrinsic value, it is paper, it's worth nothing. And so it's causing, and they have well over 15 million bills of exchange sitting in Washington, D.C. So I hope they get well over that many of those sitting in Puerto Rico. See? They know they're good. They don't know what to do. But they know they're good, see, because you wrote them. I didn't say that. I said this is what this man did. This is what the man did in North Carolina, and he went before the group and he showed them the check and he made a speech and all this other stuff. So that's what they reported to me. That's what they told me. They, again, see, they being the IRS told me in the beginning 3 years is all they would pay. Well, he went and put everything and they paid for more than 3 years, so it's evident that they lied again. So I filed an extension for extended time to pay to give me more time to understand this information you talk about. Can I still? Sure. Can I still file a 1041 for all years I've paid in? Also, I have a computer business that is incorporated as a sole proprietor corporation. Will this affect my ability to file 1041s? No. You're doing it as yourself. You're not the corporation. The corporation has a name. If you're incorporated, you are not the corporation. There's always a debit and a credit side. There's always a corporation and there's a real person. And so don't get trapped into that thing, well, you got a corporation, you're sunk. You can pull yourself away from anything that you've ever done. Simply why? You just speak it. You say, that's fraud you presented me with. I don't have to pay attention to that. You see, let the person come forward that says you signed a contract. There must be someone who says you signed a contract. And you can't sign a contract with a corporation. I know you're doing it all the time. You can't sign one. They can't sign because a lawful contract requires 2 signatures. You can have a unilateral contract, but you look it up in your law dictionaries.
Black law is just.
No, not Black's Law, just any of them. And it simply says that a unilateral contract is a contract made by one attorney or several attorneys with a specific intent to defraud somebody out of money. It states it right there. That's why I started getting an idea about all this stuff. I kept hearing this thing, unilateral contract. So I went in one day and with a guy named Robert Averitt, and Robert was smarter than anybody I ever knew. I mean, he could read them books, and he said he understood them, but I asked him one day, how many's in here? He said, 1 million. I said, how many of them have you mastered? He said, none. So I said, you got a long way to go, Robert. But I asked him, I said, would you show me where the contract, where you can find about contract? And I opened it because I want to find out about that unilateral. And that's what it said. It says it's a contract made by an attorney or a group of attorneys with a specific intent of defrauding people out of their money. Does the doctor you spoke of who wants to accept bonds from the patients have to put up monies, credit, in the form of a voucher to send with a bond to the U.S. Secretary of Treasury? No, she just takes that if you give it to her, and she takes it just like everybody else is doing and send it to them. But you have to tell them what to do with it. You have to tell them down there how you want it done. Please, one of your people gave me this. Please put this into my account, and give them the account in the bank you are in. Uh-oh. Somebody's written me a accepted and is this correct? Accepted and returned foreclosure in this matter. Return the voucher. You are using my exemption. If you think you're representing me, you are fired. That's true. That's the way it should be every time.
You need that part about if you're a representative, you are fired.
I think it's good in some cases. Yeah.
Well, in some cases, which cases?
Well, anytime you're dealing with an attorney. What exactly can I use a bond for? You can use it to pay taxes, property taxes, or income tax, property tax, credit cards, mortgages on houses. Huh? Do what?
Any
Corporations. Yeah, any debt to a corporation.
Loans,
That's true. Huh?
loans.
Loans, anything like that. The only thing you be scared, banks are not incorporated. What they do is they give it to an incorporated mortgage company. Banks are not incorporated. And the reason you know that, you can go and get an answer on anything from, I think it's from the head teller up to the top. Any of them can answer any question. You can go in the bank and ask them. You can't do that in a corporation. You can only answer what the attorney tells you to answer. After you file a copyright at the county level, do you need to file it with the Secretary of State? No. What you do is the power of attorney done the same way, yes. The power of attorney with the bonds is probably more important than the copyright although you can still use the copyright. But these are never required to file with the Secretary of State. You can file them by putting them on a UCC3 and put them in with your UCC1, but they don't have to be. Do you know Greenspan's house was broken into the same day as shuttle explosion? No, I didn't.
Space shuttle. Space shuttle.
Somebody, they broke into his house that day?
Yeah, Sherman Scully in Chicago said that they were looking for some things and they're just like,
I had not heard that. That's interesting, though. If it was a real break-in, he deserved it.
But they didn't get it. She
Huh?
moved the bond, whatever the documents were, had already moved to Canada back in
I see.
Andrea Mitchell.
Have you heard about Irving Schiff and Judge banning his book, Federal Mafia? Irwin's been into a lot of problems in his life. And what he tells you is true. What he doesn't tell you, he's not a bad guy. He's not out there trying to get people in trouble. But what I've found on most of them, and Lynn Meredith, all the people in We the People, they've never sat down to figure out what's going to happen to them when the feds come in. They never sit there and figure that out, and then the feds come in, the first thing to do is go get a lawyer. Then they get in trouble. Now, I don't know if Irwin does that. I've been to 2 or 3 of his seminars. I used to go listen to anybody that talk about the IRS. And he'd come into town, I'd always go to his seminars because he'd always talk about it. But I'm not for Irwin Schiff. I'm not against him. I'm for anybody that's trying to break free. And so Irwin's all right as far as I know. It says, when you accept and return foreclosure, is it best to use a red marker and write across the page? It doesn't matter if it's red as long as it's not black. As long as it's, you can tell it's an original. It can be red, green, blue, pink, whatever. But as long as you can tell it from black, because black indicates that you've made a copy. And one of those bonds has to be an original. And when you write this across it, then you want it to be to where they know you wrote it. What is the process of securing a bond? What do you mean secured it? Writing it? No, you just write it. And you can get those from Larry. And by the way, if the ones of you that wanted the books, I had books made today. So, is Rosati still commissioned? No. I forget the man's name, but I've seen it. No, he is not. He quit. They don't like. I tell you what, they've never had anybody really stay at. Rosati probably stayed there longer than anyone. The men people usually quit like crazy because they're always getting threatened to be fired. I mean, they're always threatening to take them into court and sue them and all that stuff. If a bond is relieving a debt, for example, to pay off a car, why would a bank go to the trouble of repoing the car? Because they can steal it back from you and sell it. And it's all it is. It's a civil matter from that point. It doesn't have anything to do. They have the right now from the police to go out and steal your car. And then the police will tell you, well, we can't do anything about it because it's a civil matter. That's between you and the bank. But yet you go steal a car and you're in trouble. So, if it is paid, why would they care? Because they don't get the interest. They're after the interest. I'm sorry, we better get out of here, I guess, then.
It's 9:40.
Yeah, okay. Let us leave, I'm sorry, okay, thank you.